Okay, so good morning, everyone. This is a continuation of our discussion about adjusting entries. So the first, okay, allow me to share first. Okay, so we are now at the accrued income. So our last discussion was last January pa, no? And then last December pa. Okay, so accrued income. Income already earned but not yet received. Be reminded that in accounting, we use accrual method. And accrued income is an income that we have already earned. Kumbaga, naanatay katungod aning income because we have rendered the service already or we have delivered the goods. Therefore, the customer already has an obligation to pay us because again, we have earned it already but not yet received. So the entry to record accrued income is debit income receivable or accrued income. But normally we use the receivable as our debit and credit the appropriate income account to record the transaction. Then explanation is to record the income earned. So for example, we have a 1-year 6% note receivable in the amount of 200,000 pesos was received on January 1, 2016. The interest and the principal are payable on maturity date. Give the adjusting journal entry on June 30, 2006. But before we go into the entry to record the adjusting entry, pakita sana ko sa inyo kung sa ang entry at the time of the receipt of the note. So let's create a new slide. Okay. So the entry to record that one is, of course, when pag sinabing note receivable, okay, nagpagawas to o kwarta. Okay, we have released an amount of money amounting to 200,000. Therefore, it will require a credit of cash, 200,000, and then the debit note receivable, 200,000 as well. Okay, so to record the release of money. Okay. Something like that. Taas-taas na siya, but that will do. So that mas masabtan ninyo the flow of the adjusting entry. So, nagpagawas ng kwarta, 200,000, and then the client will be repaying us the principal amount together with the 6% interest. So, take note of the date as well. It was recorded or released January 1, 2016, and it will require an adjusting entry on June. So let us count the number of months. So January, we include January because it started on January 1. January, February, March, April, May, and then June 30. So that's 6 months. So the entry to record the accrued income is interest receivable. Take note, we already, since kita ang nagpautang sa maong kwarta, we are already entitled of the interest. Okay? Nanatay katungod sa maong interest in relation to the notes receivable. And since we already have the rights over that amount of money, then we can now record a receivable account. And also, nganong naatay receivable? Because we have already earned an interest already. So debit, receivable, credit, interest, income. Now, the question is, why is it 6,000 pesos? Take note that the principal amount of our note is 200,000 pesos. Multiplied by 6%, which is interest, it should be 200,000 times 0.06. That is 12,000. Pero sir, ganong 6,000 lang man? Because the duration na naglapse in relation to our receivable is only 6 months. Kaning 12,000 pesos manggod, the 6% here, if it is silent, it means that it is good for 1 year. So since it's only for 6 months, then we have to compute it proportionately. Times 6 divided by 12. Therefore, 6,000 pesos lang ato ang accrued interest for the said period. Okay, then to record interest income. Another example. Drumstick Chicken rendered catering services last December 15. The contract price amounted to 75,000 pesos. Since no payment has been received yet, Drumstick did not make any journal entry. So take note, this is only applicable if you are using a cash method approach, okay, in accounting. So you will only have a recording if there is cash involved. However, in this case, wala may cash. So ang bookkeeper decided not to record the transaction. However, since we are following an accrual method, then we record income when earned, not when received. So anong na-earn naman? Because we have already rendered the catering service amounting to 75,000 pesos. Therefore, it needs an adjusting entry. So, sa man atong adjusting entry, we simply debit accrued service income or accounts receivable 75,000. So this is a receivable from our clients. And then we record service income because we have already rendered the service. Ayan. Now let's now go to bad debts or doubtful accounts or uncollectible accounts. So if namoy tindahan and then nagkapautang mo, you are already aware that a portion of your receivables, a portion sa imuhang kolektahonon is dili na makolekta. Tungod kay wala na nagpakita ang nangutang or nihangyo ang nangutang nga di na siya kabayad or something like that. So for some various reasons, dili siya makolekta. Therefore, it is important or tawag nito, it is much as a conservative approach. Tama ba ito? Anyway, so the point is there is a portion of your collectibles that will not be collected. So muna siya ginatawag ng mga bad debts. Okay? So the entry to record bad debts is debit bad debts expense, credit allowance for bad debts if you are following the allowance method, although nata ginatawag na expense method pod. But most of the time, and following the matching principle, mas nindot ang allowance method. So you debit bad debts expense, then credit allowance for bad debts, or simply you can use the doubtful accounts expense, then credit allowance for doubtful accounts. Now, take note that bad debts is an expense account, while the allowance for bad debts is a contra asset account that is deducted from the accounts receivable in terms of presentation. Okay, so let's have an example. Accounts receivable shows a balance of 100,000. So na daw kay kolektahon 100,000 pesos. And it is estimated that 8% of this 100,000 is uncollectible. Give the adjusting journal entry on December 31. So simple lang ni siya, no? So we have a collectible of 100,000 pesos and 8% that is uncollectible daw. Since we have not yet recorded an account for bad debts, then we record the entirety of the 8,000 pesos. So debit bad debts expense or doubtful accounts 8,000, the credit allowance for bad debts 8,000 pesos to record the estimated uncollectible accounts. Again, this is an estimated uncollectible accounts, not yet an actual, not yet a confirmed uncollectible. So there is also a corresponding entry to record if confirmed na gyud na dili siya makolekta. But for now, this is just an estimated uncollectible accounts. Okay, example number 2. Accounts receivable show a balance of 100,000. Nagyapon siya 100,000. But at the same time, this time around, the allowance for bad debt reflects a 1,000. Sa ato pa, natay accounts receivable. And then we have a prior balance sa ato ang allowance for bad debt. Sa ato pa, last year, naka-record na taog allowance for bad debts or doubtful accounts. Na siya balance nga 1,000 pesos. Okay? Still, this year, 8% daw gihapon ang uncollectible. So the computation will be little bit different because we have an existing balance sa toang allowance. So, say nagboy sa the entry to record the adjustment is debit. Bad debts expense, 7,000 pesos. Credit allowance for bad debt, 7,000 pesos. Sir, nganong 7,000 man and dili man 8,000? Because, again, natay accounts receivable, 100,000. And the estimated allowance or the estimated uncollectible accounts is 8%. Therefore, for this year, ang balance na to dapat sa allowance for doubtful accounts is 8,000. Okay? So again, balik ko na ko ha. 100,000 ang accounts receivable. Ang estimated doubtful accounts is 8%. So, at the end of the accounting period, mag-reflect dapat ang 8% as our allowance for bad debts or doubtful accounts. But since naanatay na record niya 1,000 from last year and kailangan nato siya mahimong 8,000, then the adjusting entry will only require us to record 7,000 additional bad debts expense. So, prior balance of 1,000 plus the 7,000, it will add up to the 8,000 required balance at the end of the period. So, I hope that's clear. If not, then feel free to raise a question in the comment section. Now, depreciation expense. Medyo taas-taas na siya, no? So, this is the allocation of plant asset or the non-current assets, especially with regards to PPEs, property, plant, and equipment. So the allocation of the cost over its estimated useful life. This is the expense allotted for the wear and tear of property, plant, and equipment due to the passage of time. So let's just leave the definition at that. Although there is, when you reach your intermediate accounting, there is a deeper discussion with regards to PPE and depreciation expense. So for now, let's just stick to this overview. So there are 3 factors to consider in relation to depreciation expense. Cost or the purchase cost of the property, the salvage value, and then the estimated useful life. So the cost is simply the purchase price, the historical cost of the asset. So for example, if you purchased it 5 years ago at 5 million pesos, then 5 million pesos is your purchase cost. Now, salvage value. Salvage value is basically the amount that you can salvage from a property, a non-current asset. So, for example, katong 5 million na asset nga gipalit nato 5 years ago. So, 5 years ago nato siya gipalit and then it can be used for 5 years. At the end of its useful life, pwede pa daw nato siya mabaligya for 500,000 pesos. Sa ato pa, at the end of its useful life, we can salvage, okay, we can still salvage or save or retrieve 500,000 pesos. So that is what you call a salvage value. So ang iyahang price or recoverable value at the end of its useful life. Okay, so that is salvage value. And of course, estimated useful life, this is the duration or the period that we can use a particular asset. Ayan. So I hope that's clear. So the computation to compute the depreciation is this one. So cost less the salvage value we will arrive at our depreciable cost divided by the useful life, then we can derive our annual depreciation. So, unahan natin annual depreciation, the entry to record depreciation expense is debit, depreciation expense, credit, accumulated depreciation. So, depreciation expense is an expense account. So, we record this depreciation expense in relation to the portion na nagamit nato sa ato ang non-current assets. And unsa man ning accumulated depreciation? Accumulated depreciation, just like the allowance for doubtful accounts, is a contra asset account. So in the presentations of financial statements, accumulated depreciation is deducted from the asset. So for example, 5 million ang asset less the accumulated depreciation, then we have computed its net realizable value or its book value. Okay, so ginadeduct na siya sa asset. Now, let's have an example. A building with an estimated useful life of 30 years finished construction on June 1, 2016. The cost of the building is 4.8 million pesos with an estimated salvage value of 300,000. So let's identify the three elements relevant to the computation of our depreciation. The cost, which is 4.8 million, salvage value, which is 300,000, and the useful life, which is 30 years. It is also important to take note of the date, okay, the June 1, 2016. Now, we are required to give the adjusting entry on December 31. Okay. So before we proceed to the computation, take note nahuman ang construction June 1. And we are required to have an adjusting entry December 31. So pila na siya kabulan. So June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So that's 7 months. Take note ninyo na. So cost 4.8 less salvage value, we have 4.5 million. That's our depreciable cost. Divided by the useful life, that's 150 annual depreciation. That's for 1 year, that's for 1 year, 150,000. But we will only be depreciating the asset for 7 months, June 1 until December 31. So in order to compute for the monthly depreciation, 150 divided by 12, that's 12.5, then times 7 months, we arrive at 87,500. Ayan. The debit depreciation, 87,500. Credit, 87,500. Accumulated depreciation. Okay, example number 2. The company constructed its building. Cost is 22 million. The building has an estimated useful life of 25 years and a salvage value of 1 million. The building was completed last April 30. Okay take note na human siya April 30 and depreciated started after its completion. And then it's not explicitly stated, but I presume that the adjusting entry required is at the end of the year, December 31. So ihapon sa nato. We don't include April because it's April 30. So magsugod ang atong counting on May 1. So May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So that's 8 months. Okay, compute sa nato. Cost, 22 million less salvage value. The depreciable cost is 21 million. Divided by the useful life, annual depreciation is 840,000. Divided by 12 months because we are not interested in the annual depreciation because gamit lang na to siya for 8 months. So monthly depreciation is 70,000 times 8 months, that's 560. Therefore, the adjusting entry is depreciation expense 560, accumulated depreciation 560,000 pesos. Okay, another one. This is a bit more comprehensive. So Australia delivery needed 4 trucks in 2015. 2 trucks were purchased on May 1, So wala siya gisabay, no? Ang 2 trucks ni abot May 1 and for 1,850,000 each. And then another 2 trucks were purchased on July 1. So that's 2 months after. Pero mas mahal siya, 15%. And then salvage value is 8% of the acquisition cost, and the estimated useful life is 8 years. If you notice, the salvage value is in percentage, a percentage of the acquisition cost. So dili siya figures. Nevertheless, it's still the same, no? So the entry to record the depreciation expense is debit. Depreciation expense, credit, accumulated depreciation, 528,329. So, yun sana siya pagkuha. Okay. Take note that there were 2 sets of purchase during the year. One in May 1 and the other is on July 1. And katong July, it is 15% more expensive than the purchase in May. So, okay. So, sa May, ang kantidad daw ato is 1,850,000 each. Duha man to times 2. Okay, so therefore, that's 3.7 billion. And the purchases on July is 15% more expensive. Okay, 4,255. And then the salvage value, 8% of the acquisition cost. One na siyang 3,4. While for the main, 296. Ayan. So depreciable cost is the following divided by useful life of 8 years. So we arrive at the annual depreciation. Divide it by 12, then we will be having this monthly depreciation. Take note nga ang isa gipalit sa May. Ang isa gipalit sa July. Therefore, for the equipment purchased in May, we will be depreciating them for 8 months. So monthly depreciation times 8 months, that's so if you use the calculator na ay difference in centavos, but for purposes of discussion, we'll just use this figures. So immaterial man ang difference, so let's just stick with this one. And then you add the two depreciation, you will arrive at 528,329.17. And mo na siya ang ato ang entry. So that's it for depreciation. So kani siya, these are just applications, no? But for our discussion, that's the end of the discussion for adjusting entries. So if you have questions, feel free to write down your question, clarification, or if you have examples na wala ninyo nasabtan, then you can also put it there. Okay, thank you and have a good day.